Pratam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manubhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Text 3 of Sri Damodar Astakam. Iti driksva lilabir ananda kunde swagosham nimajantam akyapayantam tadi eshita gneshu bhaktar jitatvam puna prematastam satavritti vande. Would you like me to repeat everything? Translation. By such childhood pastimes as this, he is drowning the inhabitants of Gokul in pools of ecstasy, and is revealing to those devotees who are absorbed in knowledge of his supreme majesty and opulence that he is only conquered by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy and is free from all conceptions of awe and reverence. With great love, I again offer my obeisances to Lord Damodar hundreds and hundreds of times. So in this text, there are two main topics. The first topic is that the Lord drowns all beings who are in Gokul in a pool of ecstasy. In other words, he completely captivates them by his transcendental activity and makes them taste ecstatic love for him. And the second main topic is that he comes under the sway or under the control of his pure devotees. So, let us discuss the first topic of this verse. How all living beings in Gokul become overwhelmed in ecstatic love. There is a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 11th chapter, text 6. When Nanda Maharaj saw his own son bound with ropes to the wooden mortar and dragging it, he smiled and released Krishna from his bonds. So some of you may have been in Vrindavan when we narrated this pastime, but maybe others have not. We can repeat it a little bit more briefly. This pastime is only briefly given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, because the Srimad Bhagavatam gives in more or less sutra form, in a very abbreviated form, Krishna's principal pastimes. But the Goswamis, Acharyas, they have expanded or elaborated on these pastimes. So this particular pastime, as well as many others, has been described by Jiva Goswami in a beautiful book known as Gopal Champu. Jiva Goswami, of course, is the most erudite scholar, and he has written the Satsandarbhas, which are the theological and philosophical foundation for our Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. But he has also written another work which is more poetic, and in which he more than just treats the matters philosophically, expands upon the rasa. Rasa means taste or mellow. So when you taste something, you get ras. So when considering philosophy, certainly there is taste. But when the philosophy is put into a literary composition which is in the format of a story, then even though you may not realize you're getting the philosophy, you get a great deal of taste. And to relish or taste is the real point in spiritual life in any case. Just like we see that one may have a philosophical conception about something. You may understand that the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, you may know all the verses. But still, if you are not careful and Maya presents herself in a very alluring way, you could be captivated. But if you are tasting Krishna consciousness in a very satisfying and deep way, then even if Maya presents herself, still you may not be brought down. So, this Gopal Champu is presented in such a way that all of Krishna's pastimes are presented with great, in a very, very sweet and deep devotional mood. So this pastime has been explained that when Mother Yasoda bound Krishna, Krishna brought down the twin Jamal Arjun trees, and the sound was made a very, very loud cracking sound. Very loud, so much so that everyone was astonished and startled. Even before this happened, Mother Yasoda had already been thinking in her mind, have I done the right thing? Should I bind him or should I not have bound him? Was I doing the right thing? And she was, moving, wandering between the 2 points, that maybe I should have, maybe I shouldn't have. And then she heard this sound, and she became extremely worried. Because already in her mind, she was a little nervous, thinking that maybe I should not have tied him up like this. Because Mother Yasoda is simply overwhelmed by maternal affection for Krishna. The reason she tied up Krishna was to teach him a good lesson, that he was a little naughty. So, when she rushed to the scene, Nanda Maharaj, all the senior people of Vrindavan, they were all there. And in a flash, in a moment, Mother Yasoda saw this scene. And there was baby Krishna with the rope that she had tied around his belly, attached to the grinding mortar. The trees, giant trees, were uprooted. And in her mind she thought, what have I done? If these trees had fallen even slightly differently, they could have crushed my son. So she was terrified, because she realized that Krishna is my life and soul, and because of what I have done, I may have caused him to become crushed in this way. On Nanda Maharaj's part, he saw Krishna, and Krishna was more or less crawling there, and he came up and the rope was bound. And after hearing what had happened from the other boys, Krishna asked, Nanda Maharaj asked Krishna, who has done this? And Krishna said, Ma. My mother has done this. He simply said, Ma. So, Nanda Maharaj said, your mother has done this? Krishna went like this, just nodding his head. So Nanda Maharaj untied the rope. Sometimes it is asked why it was that others did not untie, because the cowherd boys were also there, and they wanted to play with Krishna. Why didn't they untie the rope when it was stuck like this? And it is explained that because Mother Yasoda tied this rope with maternal or parental affection, only someone else with a similar type of affection could untie it. And therefore, the cowherd boys, who were in friendly love, they could not untie the rope. So Nanda Maharaj immediately took Krishna in his arms, smelled his head, because this is what a father does with a small young son, patted him, stroked him, and took him with him. And he went to the assembly. And he was very, 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 very disturbed and upset. Why is that door open? He was extremely disturbed and upset. So he took Krishna and he took Balaram both, keeping them on his laps. And keeping on his lap, he took him in the assembly. And gradually it came time for lunch. And Mother Yasoda was so much overwhelmed with grief and actually fear that she could not cook. None of the ladies cooked. They were all in great anxiety and fear because they had never seen Nanda Maharaj in a mood the way he was, because he was actually very, very disturbed and angry. And he arranged for some milk to be brought, the cows to be milked in the cow shed, and brought some milk, and they fed Krishna. In fact, he may have directly fed Krishna from the cows. So Krishna and Balaram were eating like this, just drinking milk. And all day he kept him like that. Then finally it came to evening, and still none of the ladies had entered the kitchen, and nobody in Braj was eating, because everyone was practically still in a state of shock, especially all the ladies. So nobody was cooking, nobody was eating, and Krishna and Balaram were there with their father. So then finally Balaram's mother Rohini came, and she said to Krishna that, "You have not eaten. Aren't you hungry?" And Krishna said, "No." "Why? How will you eat?" Krishna said, "My father will feed me." And then she said, "But where will you go to sleep at night?" He said, "I will sleep with my father." "Don't you want that your mother should look after you?" And Krishna said, "No." So this was his mood, that I don't want anything now from my mother. My father will do everything for me. So actually Rohini was very worried about this, because Yasoda was in such a state that practically she was overwhelmed with grief, she was sobbing constantly, and Rohini was actually worried what would happen to her. So Rohini kept saying to Krishna that, your mother always cooks for you, you should let her cook. And Krishna said, "No. My father will feed me, my father will bathe me, my father will take care of me at night, and I will only stay with him." And Balaram also was in the same mood. Now I will only stay with my father and with Krishna. Even though Balaram's father is Vasudeva, but Balaram actually never considered Vasudeva as his real father, but he took it that Nanda Maharaj was his father, because Nanda Maharaj raised him and did everything that a father does for him. So Rohini finally was so worried that she said to Krishna that your mother is thinking about you and she is missing you. Don't you want to go to him? And Krishna just said, "No, I don't. I will stay with my father." So then Rohini said finally that if you don't go to your mother, then, she made some motion like this, meaning that she may lose her life. And when Krishna heard these words, tears started to come down from his eyes, and he became overwhelmed. His eyes filled up with tears, and he jumped off of his father's lap, and he rushed into the house and rushed to where his mother was and embraced her like this. And Yasoda was crying, and Krishna was crying, and Yasoda was sobbing, and finally after some time she gave her breast to Krishna, and Krishna started to drink milk, and then she became a little pacified. So Jiva Goswami has described this pastime of what happened, and we get some idea from this how Krishna overwhelms his devotees. It says that he drowns them in pools of ecstasy. So you'll get some idea from that pastime. Now, another verses are given in the Bhagavatam, some more verses. Text 7 and 8. The gopis would say, "If you dance, my dear Krishna, then I shall give you a sweetmeat." By saying these words or by clapping their hands, all the gopis encourage Krishna in different ways. At such times, although he was the supremely powerful personality of Godhead, he would smile and dance according to their desire, as if he were a wooden doll in their hands. Sometimes he would sing very loudly at their bidding. In this way, Krishna came completely under the control of the gopis. Sometimes Mother Yasoda and her gopi friends would tell Krishna, "Bring this article," or "Bring that article." Sometimes they would order him to bring a wooden plank, wooden shoes, or wooden measuring pot, and Krishna, when thus ordered by the mothers, would try to bring them. Sometimes, however, as if unable to raise these things, he would touch them and stand there. Just to invite the pleasure of his relatives, he would strike his body with his arms to show that he had sufficient strength. So, these verses give us some idea of the second quality, which is he comes under the sway of his pure devotees. Before we go there, before coming on this point, we can see, just before going to that point, just a few of the words. Ananda Kunde. Anyway, I'll come back to that point. So, now the verses I just read from the Bhagavatam describe the quality of how Krishna comes under the control of his devotees. Just like a wooden doll, it's mentioned here. Just as a person moves a puppet by the strings, the elderly gopis were dealing with Krishna in such a way that he was being moved here and there. Please bring this, please bring that. Just like the picture we see in one of the books, Krishna is bringing the wooden slippers on his head to his father. And sometimes he would act in such a way to say that the items are too heavy, and he would touch them, but he could not lift them. So they would feel so much ecstasy seeing this. And sometimes he would, slap his arms like this to show that he was very strong, even though he was just a little boy. So he was simultaneously throwing them into so much ecstatic love. And at the same time, he was showing that he was completely dependent upon them. But actually, they're depending upon him. So in the Bhagavatam, the verse which we read, the words Svanam Pritim Samudvahan. By his actions, he stimulated the complete love of his dearmost relatives. In other words, by the potency known as Lila Shakti, this is one of the energies of Krishna, the pastimes are performed in such a way that they make the love of his devotees increase unlimitedly. Just like Jiva Goswami has shown in that description of Gopal Champu. And Svagosha, in the verse that we are singing, Svagosham Nimajantam Akyapayantam. Svagosha means that These pastimes, Svagosha, they describe the glories of Krishna and the glories of his devotees. As we shall see, his devotees are not ordinary devotees. And this will be brought out next, how these devotees are very special. So Krishna's pastimes are done in such a way to proclaim the glories of his devotees. Just like we see, an obvious one is the Battle of Kurukshetra is done in such a way to proclaim the glories of the Pandavas. And you can think of all the pastimes, right? The Maharaj Chitraketu fighting with and getting cursed and taking his birth as Vritrasura and fighting with Indra is to glorify Vritrasura, to show the glories of Vritrasura and the glories of Chitraketu Maharaj. This is the purpose of that pastime. The pastimes with Nrsingadev and Prahlad Maharaj, to show the glories of Prahlad. So these Leelas are done to glorify his pure devotees, because his pure devotees have a nature which is quite different than all other mixed devotees, as we shall see. Svagosham also means that his family and the residents of Gokul are all manifestations also of Lila Shakti. The Lila Shakti, the energy, the pastime potency of the Lord, arranges the places of his pastimes. In many ways we can say this is Lila Shakti is a function also of the Sandini Shakti, who arranges the spiritual abode and who manifests the spiritual form of Krishna's devotees. Ananda Kunde Nimajantam. They experience Parama Sukha. Now, in Bhagavad Gita we hear Sukha, Dukkha, happiness and distress. But the happiness which the Gokul residents are experiencing is not normal Sukh. It's not Sukh, because Sukh in this world is mixed with Dukh. You cannot find happiness in this world which is not full of also misery. Even the very idea that the happiness will eventually finish is itself the cause of suffering, or anxiety, at least anxiety if not suffering. Just like you cannot find any mode which is pure. You cannot find pure goodness in the material world. It's always mixed with passion and ignorance. We have that experience. We try to do activities in goodness, but our natures are also passionate and ignorant. They mix in with the goodness. So here, on the other hand, Krishna's pastimes are all a manifestation of the Suddha Sattva, pure goodness. There's no contamination of passion or ignorance. So it's pure goodness, Suddha Sattva. The spiritual world is Suddha Sattva, Vishuddha Sattva, existence. Because it is Vishuddha Sattva, or pure goodness, it is free of any type of suffering. And the happiness is Paramasukh, it's called the supreme happiness, or Ananda. It is bliss. So the bliss, the happiness which inundates the residents of Gokul, has nothing to be compared with in this material world. There's no comparison. And it's mentioned in Nectar of Devotion that one drop of that happiness is more than oceans of happiness which come from impersonal Brahman realization, which is also said to give a certain type of happiness, because in Brahman there is also no suffering, no misery. But the happiness experienced by the impersonalists, if you have oceans of it, it cannot be compared with one drop of this type of happiness. So in this verse, Tadiye Shita Gneshu, unto those who are attached to knowledge of the Lord's majestic opulences, and who worship him accordingly, he is never submissive. The point being brought out here in this verse is that there are different types of devotees. There are Jnana Bhaktas, Karma Mishra Bhaktas, different types of mixed devotees. Just like we see, people have different motives why they come to Krishna consciousness. For example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Chatur Vida Bhajante Mam, Janaha Sukritino Arjuna, Arto Jignasa Artarti, Genicha Bharata Sabha. 4 types of persons come to Krishna. They're not pure. They're Mishra Bhaktas. They're mixed devotees. They come out of distress. They want wealth. That means they're mixed with karma. Their desire, they're performing actions in Krishna consciousness with a fruitive mentality. We see that, especially sometimes in poverty-stricken countries. It's very hard to find pure devotees. Prabhupada said that was one good thing about the Western world, that most of the time when people join there, they don't at least join with that type of mixed motive. On the other hand, sometimes Krishna says the best person is one who is searching after knowledge of the absolute truth. But sometimes we see, Baunam Janmanamante Gyanamamam Prapadyante. It takes many births of such searching to come to the point of Vasudeva Sarvamiti. So here it mentions that mixed devotees, and especially not just mixed devotees, but devotees who worship the Lord, keeping in mind the Lord's opulences. Opulences means how he is the supreme Ishvara, the supreme controller. Just like you see in so many religions, people worship God, the Creator, the Father of the creation, the Destroyer, the all-knowing witness, Paramatma. Now, those who worship the Lord in this way can never get the ananda, the bliss, that these svagosha, these residents, Krishna's own family and friends of Gokul, can get. How can it be? How can they possibly get it? Because they're in awe. They're in veneration of God. God is great for them. For such persons, they can't possibly accept that that little boy living in Gokul is everything to them. They are worshipping Narayan. That's why you see in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when Gopakumar goes to Vaikuntha and he calls out to Lord Narayan, "Hey Gopal," all of the Vaikuntha Vasis say, "Shh, don't say that. Don't you know who you're speaking to? This is the Supreme Lord. Don't take so seriously that little pastime he plays when he comes as a cowherd boy." So they see Lord Narayan as the Adi Purush, the original. Now, of course, someone may say, well, doesn't Mother Yasoda worship Lord Narayan in her household? She does. She also does. But her, real worshipable deity is not Lord Narayan, it's Lord Krishna. So her doing it is a function of the Lila Shakti. She worships Lord Narayan, and sometimes she says that the reason why nothing inauspicious has happened to Krishna, why the demons have all been defeated, is because I have worshipped Narayan. That is the influence of Yogamaya on her. So, for devotees who worship God with awe and reverence, they will never ever be able to understand these prayers of Satyavrata Muni. They cannot understand them properly, in the right mood. Bhaktir Jitatvam. He is conquered by his loving devotees. In other words, there are 2 different types of persons being described here. On the one hand, the Aishvarya Bhaktas, and on the other hand, the Madhurya Bhaktas. Those Bhaktas who are attracted by the sweet nature of Krishna. So, two types of bhakti is being described here. Vaidhi Bhakti and spontaneous or rag Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti leads to, if it doesn't manifest gradually into rag Bhakti, it will lead to Vaikuntha. Vaidhi Bhakti means devotional service according to the rules and regulations, in which you always remember God is great, I am insignificant, God is my master, I am his servant. This is the mood of the Vaidhi Bhakta, isn't it? That is how we're doing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. But you can see the Vrijvasis are not in this mood. Yasoda Mata, Nanda Baba, they're not thinking like this. They're thinking, God is my son. Or the cowherd boys, God is my friend. Or the gopis, God is our lover. And they don't even think God. They say, Krishna is our lover. Krishna is our friend. Krishna is our adorable child. And without us, he will die. That's what Mother Yasoda was thinking. If the trees fall on him, he could have died. God cannot die. No one will ever think of Lord Narayan dying. But they don't think that he's God. Sometimes when it's suggested, Nanda Maharaj says very clearly, he says, you can say that he's God. But as far as I know, he's not even an ordinary person. Because even ordinary persons can control their senses, but he eats sweets all times of the day. He cannot control himself. He passes urine in so many times, so many places. Even when his mother tells him not to do it, he does it. He's doing so many things like this. I don't even think he's an ordinary yogi from past life. What to speak of being God. So, this is the way, this type of spontaneous love is in the hearts of Krishna's eternal family members. And when devotees of this world perform their devotion, remembering the mood of these eternal associates of Krishna, that is called spontaneous devotion or rag bhakti. And that kind of bhakti gradually will lead to Krishna. It will lead to Vrindavan. Otherwise, if one always remains in awe and reverence, then one's destination is Vaikuntha Dham, where God is worshipped in awe and reverence. So here the point is made that, you remember in the verse it says, he is only conquered by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy and is free from all conceptions of awe and reverence. This is a verse we're singing every day, right? You see that? Right? That's your translation also. Huh? Similar? You have a different translation? Oh, this is from the first. Yeah, this is the original published one. So, Akyapayantam. Akyapayantam means he has fully displayed this quality for all to see. Everyone can see it, but everybody takes it in a different way. In other words, the Lord's pastimes are performed for all to see. But according to the kind of devotion one has, one will see it in a different way. Just like when Mother Yasoda sees Krishna, or the best example is when Krishna entered the arena for fighting with the wrestlers. 10 types of persons saw him in 12 different ways. And it's described there that the fathers and mothers saw him as their child, and they also felt karuna ras. They felt both they felt parental affection, Vatsalya Bhav, and Karuna Bhav, compassion, because he was so small, the wrestlers were so big. His friends felt Sakya Bhav, friendship, love of friendship, and they also felt Hasya, laughing. They were in a laughing mood because they thought Krishna has already killed a lot bigger opponents than these fellows. So they were joking. They thought the whole thing was going to be a good, outing. So, and the yogis who saw him saw that he was the Paramatma who had entered into the arena. The Lord himself had entered. And Kamsa saw him as fear personified. In this way, different persons sitting there saw him in all different ways. So, according to the mood of the worshipper, Krishna's pastimes will be seen in different ways. That is the point. So unless one has the mood of the residents of Braja, they cannot understand the Damodar Lila in the way that Satyavrata Muni has recited and sung. They cannot understand it in the mood of Raj Bhakti. And especially those who are Gyanis, not only Gyanis, but even different types of Gyanis. Sometimes we see Jnana Mishra Bhaktas, and sometimes Gyanis are Kaivalya. They see everything as one. Neither of them are qualified to understand the Damodar Lila properly. Impersonalists certainly cannot understand these pastimes because they don't understand the personal conception of the Lord. So when they see these pastimes, they think that the unlimited, undifferentiated, unqualified Brahman has temporarily become covered by Maya and is exhibiting a form which is known as Krishna and all the residents of Vrindavan and you and me and everything else, which are all products of Maya. And actually, these are only to focus our mind for a while, but we are meant to go beyond this. So they have no faith at all in these pastimes. They think in such a fallacious way. We know that this philosophy of impersonalists is completely wrong, that Maya can never cover Krishna any more than a cloud can cover the sun. Clouds are made by the sun. Water is evaporated and formed into clouds. Clouds are made by the sun, not that the cloud can cover the sun. But we can become covered by a cloud because we are small and tiny. And from our limited perspective, when we look up, we think the clouds are covering the sun. But actually the clouds are covering us. The sun is so many times bigger than a cloud, but a cloud is many times bigger than us. But because everything is viewed with the egotistic conception that I am the center, we forget that we are the ones who are being bewildered. So pramataha means super excellent loving devotion of the highest order. Prema pumartha mahan. This is the goal. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to develop this type of love that the residents of Braja have. Actually, these verses are encouraging us to aspire for Braj Bhakti. And that's why the Gaudiya Vaishnavas do this Damodar prayers. This is very helpful for Braj Bhakti. Very helpful. Because in worshipping Lord Damodar in this way, we go beyond all conceptions of awe and reverence. Hearing this pastime is certainly a function beyond Aishvarya, opulence. Satavritti Vande, bowing down thousands of times to not only Lord Damodar, but the specific process of spontaneous bhakti, rag bhakti, which brings the Supreme Lord under the devotee's control. So when he ends this verse, right, he says, Puna prematastam satavritti vande. I offer thousands of obeisances, not only to Lord Damodar. It says here, with great love I again offer my obeisances to Lord Damodar hundreds and hundreds of times. But not only to Lord Damodar, but I'm offering my obeisances to that process of spontaneous devotion, rag bhakti, which allows us to achieve a position where the Lord becomes subservient to his devotee. So I bow down to that type of love. And I don't want anything else. You'll see in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Gopakumar doesn't want anything else. Because the Lord can certainly award Vaikuntha, liberation, quite easily. But this type of liberation, which is Braj, residence in Braja, is very rarely achieved. Very rarely achieved. Most dear of all. So we have to only bow down to this and don't bow down to anything else. That should be the firm determination of a Krishna conscious devotee. Of course, we are taught in the beginning, bow down. Because in the beginning, when we come to Krishna consciousness, we're not bowing down to anyone. We're very arrogant fools. So we learn to bow down and we begin to worship with great awe and reverence and respect. But gradually we have to understand what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is coming to give. He's coming to give that specific type of devotion which will elevate one to Vraja, which is the spontaneous love. Natural love should be evoked. So, this prayer is certainly offered with that mood. In the Bhagavatam, there is a verse 9 which says, "To pure devotees throughout the world who could understand his activities, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna exhibited how much he can be subdued by his devotees, his servants. In this way, he increased the pleasure of the Vrijbasis by his childhood activities." Tad Vidam indicates devotees who are attached to Bhagavad Aishvarya Gyan. They cannot understand this Lila. We have explained this now. And finally, anyway, this verse, which I have read, confirms, this is the Bhagavatam verse. Sanatana Goswami has recited the 9th verse of the Bhagavatam, giving it as evidence of the points which he has made today, that we have discussed today. Krishna can be subdued by his devotees, not by anyone else. And in this way, he increased the pleasure of the Vrijbasis by his childhood activities. So we'll stop here. Anybody have any questions?
I heard explanation that when Krishna defeated the demons, he was Mahavishnu.
Sometimes it is when Krishna defeated the demons, he is Mahavishnu. This is the question. Krishna is the source. He's Avatari. He's the source of all the avatars, and he's Purnam. He's complete. So all Avatar Purnam, I mean, all the complete avatars appeared within Krishna. So when Krishna came, all the avatars were within him. So different demons are described to have been killed by different expansions or incarnations of Krishna. And that is why it is said like this. That means that he didn't require his full potency to kill the demons, but through any one of his expansions, who are something less than he himself, he could do away with them. Otherwise, in his form as Shyam Sundar, he's simply playing on his flute and sporting with his associates. But for the purpose of dealing with the demons, one of the expansions within him, that aspect of his potency, or that aspect of him, destroys the demons. The form that killed the demons is the form of Krishna. But to that extent to which his potencies were utilized, we say that it was such and such expansion that killed the demon. But it's not as if Mahavishnu or whoever it may have been jumped out of the body of Krishna and slew the demon. No, not like that. The form of Krishna was the one dealing with the demon. But we understand that a certain aspect of one of Krishna's expansions, that mood, that aspect of Krishna was responsible for killing that demon.
In terms of the preaching for the Lord, like the Mayavadi said that God comes under Maya. So we say that God comes under Yoga Maya. And when he cries, he feels fear. So from an appearance, from hearing about God's actions, and we come into Krishna consciousness, it's the same thing. You say like
No. And Yogamaya and Mahamaya are not the same. If you say God, they say, impersonalists say God comes under Mahamaya, devotees say God comes under Yogamaya, but there's a vast difference between Yogamaya and Mahamaya. How do you explain it? The explanation is that Mahamaya makes you forget. By the arrangement of Mahamaya, you become the enemy of God. And by the arrangement of Yogamaya, you become the devotee of God. So you can't say that the function is the same. By Mahamaya's arrangement, you forget God and try to become God's competitor. But by the function of Yogamaya, all that you remember is God, and you become His unalloyed devotee. So they function in exact. Mahamaya makes you forgetful of God. Yogamaya makes you think of nothing but Him. But by the function of Yogamaya, you don't think that He's God, but you think of no one else but Him.
But in terms of how they affect how God behaves. In terms of how they affect how God behaves.
How they affect how God behaves? Mahamaya has no effect on how God behaves. Because it's explained that Mahamaya is at the backside of the Lord, at a distance. The Brahma Samhita says she cannot approach Krishna. Mahamaya's domain is the material creation, but Krishna is transcendental to the material creation. So Mahamaya has no effect whatsoever on Krishna, whereas Yogamaya is his intimate potency for pastimes. The whole spiritual world is affected by Yogamaya. The whole material world is under the influence of Mahamaya. They have their own jurisdiction.
Krishna, by his Yogamaya, hide his supremacy in Goloka Vrindavan. So Lord Chaitanya is also part of the Goloka thing. So, but Lord Chaitanya sometimes manifests as Sadashvara, manifested 21 hours of his different incarnations. So how is it?
Krishna also manifested his Aishvarya potency. He lifted Govardhan for 7 days and 7 nights with the small finger of his left hand. Isn't that full potency, Sarvaishvarya? Isn't it? So he also does. But by the arrangement of Yogamaya, everybody forgot. Or they thought, actually Nanda Maharaj is holding up. Or Yasoda thought by Narayan's arrangement it is happening.
So this was the similar with the different manifestation of Lord Chaitanya?
Maybe, but in any case, both manifested their potency sometimes, fully. We can't say that he did not do that. Krishna killed so many demons. Krishna also manifested it by dancing in Ras Lila. He expanded himself to be with each and every millions of gopis. Isn't that unlimited potency? He showed the whole universe within his mouth to Mother Yasoda.
But the bewildered is...
Lord Chaitanya's associates also. They had some knowledge, but the difference is, in Mahaprabhu Lila, everybody relates with Mahaprabhu as a servant and sees him as master. In Mahaprabhu Lila, that is the way it is. Everyone relates to him as master. Dasya Bhav. So in Dasya Bhav, there's always awe and reverence.
Maharaj, in that regard, Srila Prabhupada in the chapter of the Madhya explains how in Krishna Lila Vrindavan corresponds to Navadvip and in Lord Chaitanya's pastime, Mathura corresponds to Jagannath Puri and Dwarka corresponds to Lord Chaitanya's pastime as a Vaishnava.
No. Something not right. Something is not right.
That's what I was going to ask.
Anyway, I have to see it. If you show it to me, I can see it. But that's not correct. Yes? Speak louder. Gopal Champu. Devotees are not allowed to do anything that their spiritual master doesn't allow them to do. And the spiritual master doesn't deal with all devotees as one, because every devotee is not the same. So before a devotee should do anything, they should take permission of their spiritual master. How can devotees be allowed to do anything? Are all devotees allowed to worship a deity? No. So where is there anything which of course all devotees can chant Hare Krishna. There are some things all devotees can do. But as far as reading goes, the first thing all devotees are allowed to do is that they should read all of Prabhupada's books. And they shouldn't read the 9th canto before the 1st canto, or the 10th canto before the 1st canto. So there's a system for studying. So first point of the system is to read and understand thoroughly Prabhupada's books. And then at the proper time, either the devotee will have an interest or the spiritual master will see the readiness, and then taking permission from the spiritual master or getting instruction from the spiritual master, then a devotee should read. As far as Gopal Champu goes, first of all, you'll have to find an English translation, which to my knowledge doesn't exist. But if you find it, kind of show it to me. There's no book about Gopal Champu. Books may be authorized by ISKCON, but that doesn't mean that a devotee can read them without the spiritual master's permission. Just because a book is authorized by ISKCON doesn't mean, just like there are deities which are authorized by ISKCON, doesn't mean that every devotee can worship a deity. So why it's not, something being authorized by ISKCON is not synonymous with having permission of the spiritual master. Do you understand the difference? First, take permission from the Guru before doing anything. Okay, time is up. It is now time for Arti. So everyone go to Arti, right? The group who is going tomorrow morning, we will leave at 6:30 in the morning from the front here. Bring your gumchas. Okay? And we'll be out for half of the day. So if you want to bring water, bring it. We'll have a vehicle, so no problem to carry the water. Okay?